Thank you for being part of our advisory council. Today, I am going to walk you through how our counseling program supports students at every level from prevention to intensive intervention. I'll also show you how our services align with the ASCA national model and the MTSS framework, but also how they realistically meet the needs that we're seeing in our middle school today. The purpose of today's meeting is to review our student data and outline a tiered system of support. So my goal is to show you how our program is proactive, data-informed, and structured in a way that prevents escalation while still responding to higher level needs. When I look at our data, I see patterns that are really common in middle school. I see increased peer conflict, I see rising anxiety concerns, and attendance challenges. So research tells us that about 1 in 4 students may need more than just universal support. So this means we need a layered system that's proactive, but also responsive. Middle school is a transitional period. This is where students are developing an identity, they're gaining independence, and they're learning emotional regulation skills. It's a really big time in their life, and it's a really hard, challenging time in their life. And if we, as educators, can intervene proactively at this level, we can hopefully reduce long-term academic and behavioral consequences in high school and beyond. And that is why a comprehensive counseling model is so important. It cannot be optional, it has to be essential so that we can really help our students. MTSS gives us a framework for organizing support. It has 3 major tiers. So Tier 1 serves the majority of students through prevention. Tier 2 provides targeted, short-term interventions. And then Tier 3 offers more intensive, individualized services. So Henner, Walker, and colleagues emphasizes that a strong Tier 1 reduces the need for other tiers. This just makes sense. If we are giving our students a strong foundation, there will be less need for more targeted strategies. So Tier 1 is our foundation. These are supports delivered to all students throughout the school. The goal is prevention and teaching skills before problems arise. When Tier 1 is strong, we prevent unnecessary movement into Tier 2 and to Tier 3. Classroom guidance lessons are the epitome of a Tier 1 intervention. So rather than waiting for issues to escalate, classroom instruction, it allows us to teach social emotional skills proactively. So if we're seeing a trend in peer conflict or emotional regulation concerns, it just makes more sense to address those patterns school-wide in a classroom setting rather than reacting to them one student at a time. So classroom instruction is really the backbone of Tier 1 services. So instead of viewing counseling as something that only happens when there's a problem, classroom guidance shifts us into a preventative mindset. So we're teaching skills before the behaviors escalate. So for example, if our data shows an increase in peer conflict, we can implement lessons on communication, perspective taking, emotional regulation. We could do that across all grade levels. That means we're not waiting until students are in the office. We're equipping them with those tools ahead of time. It's also just really efficient. Rather than meeting individually with multiple students who are struggling with the same skill deficit, having classroom instruction allows us to address these patterns. That is exactly what Tier 1 is designed to do. It's designed to reduce the number of students who need more intensive services by strengthening these universal supports. Another benefit is school climate. So when students receive consistent language around expectations, emotional regulation, conflict resolution, this helps create predictability. Predictability builds safety, and safety improves engagement. I also think classroom guidance allows us to normalize help seeking. When all students are exposed to social emotional language and these coping strategies, it reduces stigma around counseling support, which is just a great benefit. Another great Tier 1 intervention is PBIS. So, PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports. At the Tier 1 level, it helps to establish clear and consistent expectations for all students. I love PBIS. Rather than focusing primarily on consequences, it helps emphasize teaching and expected behaviors. It emphasizes modeling them and also reinforcing them consistently. So this includes creating a behavioral matrix that outlines what respect, responsibility, or safety looks like, and also how they can differ in different settings, such as the classroom, hallways, the cafeteria, and so on. One thing that I appreciate about PBIS in the MTSS model is that it shifts behavior from being reactive to preventative. So when expectations are explicitly taught and reinforced, students are a lot less likely to engage in behaviors that result in these referrals. So it creates predictability, and as we know, predictability supports emotional regulation. So in middle school especially, consistency across staff members really matters. When students experience the same expectations and reinforcement systems in every classroom, it increases stability and it reduces confusion. So this is just a great tier one intervention. So despite having a really strong tier one support, some students are still going to require additional intervention. MTSS recognizes that universal instructions, although they're great and can help so much, it's not just going to eliminate all individual needs. So tier two, it allows us to respond early before concern escalates to crisis level interventions. Tier 2 is for students who are not fully responding to universal supports. These interventions are targeted and time limited with ongoing progress monitoring, and it's just the next step in this framework. So a Tier 2 intervention can be small group counseling. Some students, they need more than just a lesson. They need guided practice. Small groups are a great way to allow students to build coping strategies, to practice social skills, and to receive feedback in a structured and hopefully a really safe environment for them. Another great Tier 2 intervention is the check-in, check-out system. So check-in, check-out is structured, but it's very straightforward. Each morning, the student checks in briefly with a designated adult, and they just review behavioral goals and start the day with encouragement. Throughout the day, the teacher provides brief behavioral specific feedback aligned with these goals. So they'll just have like a little paper, a little tracker that they'll take with them. They'll take it to each class and give it to the teacher. At the end of the day, the student checks out, usually with the same trusted adult from the beginning of the day. They review progress, and in some cases, the tracking sheet is sent home for parent signatures. So what makes check-in, check-out effective is the combination of consistency, the adult connection, and the immediate feedback. Many students who benefit from the check-in, check-out, they struggle with attention-seeking behaviors, inconsistent reinforcement, or difficulty regulating emotions. So this system provides predictable structure and hopefully a very positive adult relationship. So this can significantly improve accountability. Also, because progress is tracked daily, it allows us to use data to determine whether the student is responding to the intervention or if they need more intensive support. All right, so moving from Tier 2 to Tier 3. So Tier 3 is more intensive supports. Tier 3 is reserved for students who are needing this more intensive, more individualized support system. These interventions are both collaborative and they're continuously monitored. So a Tier 3 intervention that can be very helpful is an FBA and behavioral intervention plan. So FBA stands for a functional behavioral assessment, and it is a structured process used to determine the purpose or the function behind a student's behavior. So instead of focusing only on what the behavior may look like, we take it a step further. We examine patterns such as when it occurs, maybe what happened before, what the student may gain or avoid as a result. Also great to know sensory outputs that might be happening during that time, transitions, etc. Common behavioral functions include seeking attention, escaping a task, or gaining sensory input. So once the function is identified, we develop a behavioral intervention plan. You'll often hear it called a BIP. The BIP includes preventative strategies, explicit skill instructions, and consistent reinforcement for replacement behavior. So what can we redirect to? The goal is not simply to stop the behavior, but to teach a more appropriate way for the student to meet the same underlying need. So we're just helping them to have those functional skills that'll serve them their whole lifetime in all these different settings. So another tier 3 intervention is a wraparound service. So this is for students who are experiencing trauma, chronic absenteeism, or complex needs. So wraparound services provide coordinated support across school, home, and the community. So in practice, wraparound services involve bringing together a team. This may include the school counselor, an administrator, some teachers, family members, and an outside provider such as a therapist or community agencies. The team then collaborates. So they create a coordinated plan to address academic, behavioral, and mental health needs. So they're doing this all simultaneously rather than working individually. There's many goals and hopes for this, one being the shared responsibility from that constant communication. So this helps the student to experience stability and support across all these different environments. I'm a huge believer in the co-collaborative model, and I really do believe that working as a team in all these different roles is the best way we can help support a student who may be struggling. So wraparound services are a great tier 3 support. So a strong MTSS framework requires ongoing evaluation. So we must monitor data at each tier, and then we adjust our supports accordingly. This helps ensure that interventions remain responsive and that we're always improving and adjusting and helping our current needs for the students. Our program aligns with the ASCA national model by balancing direct student services with consultation and data-based planning. As a Christian educator, I see a very strong overlap between evidence-based counseling practices and biblical values such as compassion, accountability, and restoration. Supporting students holistically reflects both ethical counseling standards and our call as Christians to care for others. To review a comprehensive school counseling program, it is not a collection of these isolated interventions. It is a structured system that protects instructional time. It supports mental health, and it helps strengthen our school climate. When implemented properly, MTSS, it allows us to meet students where they are without overwhelming resources. So it's just so important. I would like to take a moment to have you guys share any feedback you may have on how these interventions reflect our needs, our students' needs currently, as well as how we can strengthen our school climate using these, and any ideas you have for our partnerships moving forward in our community. So I'll just give you a minute to give your feedback because that is so essential. As we mentioned before, we're always adjusting, we're always reflecting and improving, and so this is an essential time to do so.